Hi, I'm Dr. Julie Ducharme, and welcome to the Authentically You podcast. This is a podcast where we get to interview people from around the world doing authentic things. And I love it because I get to meet new people, they become new friends. And I always say I bring them into the family. Once they're in, I'm not letting them go. Today, though, right before we bring in our guests, I do want to mention we have our Lead and Empower Her She Talks coming up in Houston on March 11th. Lead and Empower She Talks is an amazing event where we not only empower women, but we also have workshops and all sorts of other amazing things to help guide them. And the really cool thing about this is it is a fundraiser. So all the ticket sales go to women veterans transitioning out of the military. And we put that towards our program called Combat Boots to Heals. And so if you're interested in that, make sure to go to leadandempowerher.com, grab your tickets before they're all out because we do have a limited number of seats. If you're interested in being a sponsor or a vendor as well, reach out to us on that website. We'd love for you to be part of the event. We do these all over the country, so make sure you check out where we're going next. And so also today as well, I am wearing some earrings from Janae Sergio, who's going to be one of our speakers at Houston. You may not be able to see them, but they're these very cute, like sprinkly, colorful earrings. She has a line called Perfectly Flawed. It's assertive. And she has an amazing story as well. You can find her book online, but she's one of our speakers that we're highlighting today. And so if you're interested in getting some really epic, amazing clothes or finding more about Janae, you can also look her up on Amazon with her book, Perfectly Flawed as well. But she's going to be at our event in Houston. So definitely check out her story. And as a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by Synergy Learning Institute, a technical vocational college that helps serve not only your professional development needs, but also serves our veterans transitioning out of the military. All right, so I am so excited today for our guests. We have Tariko and Tabitha Satterfield, and they are on a mission to expose greatness, explain truth, and execute results. Their journey through life has provided them examples that cause their audience to live life with purpose and build generational wealth. Through their brand Xposure, they have launched Xposure Talks podcast with a mission to teach their audience how to normalize hard conversations. Xposure Academy is their digital media platform that teaches and empowers communities, schools, parents, and students to expose their gifts as assets and equip them with tools to create impact in their homes and around the world. Their blended family brings together 8 lovely children who inspire Tariko and Tabitha to cultivate fun, honesty, and growth while impacting the lives of others and serving God. Tariko and Tabitha, welcome to the show.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
for
much.
having
So good
us.
to be here.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, when I read 8 children, I'm like, I'm going to just start praying right now because God bless you. I have 2 and I think they're a handful. So you have 8. So I didn't even like process this when we were talking off camera. So you have 8 kids. Okay, give me ages and names.
Okay, so mine are the oldest. I'll start with mine. We are a blended family. So mine are this year 28, 27, 22, and 24.
Okay.
And then my 4 are this year 17, 15, 8, and 6, and 5, actually.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to be calling you guys for parental advice. I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. We're in junior high right now.
Yeah.
Let me just say she's a girl in junior high. That's all I gotta say. So you need to pray for me that I'm gonna make it through the last half of 8th grade because I feel like I am in 8th grade right now.
Listen, I've been through it with my 2 that are, I have a freshman in high school, and then I have a sophomore in high school. So I've been through it, and Tabitha's been through it 4
times.
Oh my gosh.
High school years go by really quickly. So
Yeah.
just you cherish those moments and those crazy times.
Oh my gosh. Well, my daughter who is 14, she was like, "Mom, I'm gonna be driving soon." And I'm like, "Wait, what? Oh my gosh, what?"
Right?
And then, she's like, "And I'm going to college in 4 years." I'm like, I can't even process this right now. So yeah, I'm gonna be sending you guys messages when I'm having my breakdown. Let me like,
Send them over.
I got a hormonal girl right now I need to talk to you about.
Yes,
So well, that's great. Well, I would love our listeners to learn about both of you. I think you're doing some amazing work. Education is near and dear to my heart. Being a Christian myself, obviously, talking about God and helping people with their faith is so important to me as well. And I love that you guys are talking about generational wealth and your identity. So we have some great topics to talk about. But I'd love for both of you to give a bit of your backstory and how you came into this.
Yeah, no problem. I do ladies first, but baby, if you want me to go first, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I always defer to my wife first, but I was born and raised in Jasper, Alabama, and kind of from there grew up in a very toxic family environment. And growing up in that toxic family environment, I have an amazing family. And like many of us, my family we have stories and we have personalities. We have identities that exist within the unit of the family that basically cultivates an environment that created stress, that created toxicity, that created so many other things. And if you know anything about family, then you know that many of us, what we become and what our families have become, is based on the experiences that they've had. And many times we don't even know those secrets that are in our parents' minds or in their hearts, which is the bigger place. And so for me growing up, I always knew that there was more growing up in Jasper, Alabama, which I love my home, Jasper, Alabama. Roll Tide, by the way, big Alabama football fan. But growing up and seeing that really challenged me, and it sent me into life ambitious for more, but not knowing how to execute the more that I wanted. So I began and I fumbled and failed through life. To be absolutely honest and transparent, I failed through life. Went to college on a full scholarship. I struggled through high school, but I went to college on a full singing scholarship, and and I got kicked out of college. I got kicked out of college for fighting. Now I'd walked away from fights my entire life. I had some fights, but I got kicked out for fighting. And it was the first time for me in my life that I knew that I needed some help. Like there was some rage and anger because it was the first time that I got into a fight where I blacked out.
Mm.
And and my life at that point was hanging in a balance. And I mean literally that, hanging in a balance. So as a teenager, I remember being upset and angry about the toxicity I was living in. And my parents seemed to not ever understand it, even though they were very toxic themselves. Like they didn't recognize it as that. They called it their relationship, right? They called it our family. It was labeled, this is your family. And this old phrase that's taught in most homes was taught to me: what happens in this house
Mhm.
stays in this house.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't until then, when I got kicked out of college, that I recognized that that phrase, that statement, was the very statement that brought me to that moment where I was now kicked out of college. Because what was happening in my house, in my body, in my heart, in my mind, it stayed in this house. And when it came out, it was explosive. It didn't just come out, it kicked the door down. And literally, the guy that I was fighting, I tell people, I remember when I grabbed him, that was the last moment I remember. And Dr. Ducharme, this was right after prayer. Let me let me preface it by this. We had just finished praying.
Hey, you need a little more prayer there. That's what it was.
Listen, I was like, something gotta be wrong. I grabbed him after prayer, and this individual had tried to hit me with a car. I had reported it to all the deans and told everybody that I was supposed to do, did the right thing, but nobody was defending me.
Mm.
And so I got to a place where, again, that's what it felt like in my life. It felt like that my entire life, that nobody was stepping up to defend me.
Mm.
And I literally let out on this one young man all the pain, all the anger. And before I know it, I found myself sitting in front of my dean at the college and the police.
Mm.
In my life, right then, in that moment, where this young man's parents was just trying to determine whether they were going to press charges on me or not. Because when I grabbed him, he blacked out. And so now the parents were determining whether they were going to press charges on me for attempting to kill him.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm sitting here like, no, that's not what it was. I was angry. It was a fight. but it wasn't just a fight. And in that moment, I knew that what I was carrying, the venom that I was carrying in my heart, had walked through life with me. And so that was the first place for me that I really started to understand that I needed to really unpack this venom, because the venom was becoming a poison and a toxin to my own life. And I didn't want that. And that's when I started working with young people, got really heavily devoted to schools, started to work in the schools, worked as an in-school suspension person, traveled around as a motivational speaker. I've been blessed to now work with over 20,000 students, as well as different school districts in different states, and going in and consulting with them and really helping adults to see a lot of times we're not really willing to do that work with the young people that we say we want, because for them to open up and to normalize those hard conversations, we're not necessarily ready to have them, because it would mean us unpacking some truths about us. And when we have to unpack those truths, they don't sit well. So I'm gonna stop right there. I have so much more, but I'm gonna stop there and let my baby get in.
All right.
Hello, I'm Tabitha Satterfield, and I was born and raised from both parents, my mom and my dad, in Manassas, Virginia. Manassas is where I remember when no one even knew that city even existed. And my childhood, my early childhood for me was very loving, and we were very family oriented. And it was all about, it really was all about us being together as a family, loving each other, supporting each other. And I saw that from my mom and my dad and between them. And it was later decided that they were to split up, right? As some families do, parents get divorced. And it was the first time in my life when they split up that my outlook on life, my perspective changed significantly. It was the first time that I saw lack. It was the first time that I recognized dysfunction. From there, I just had a lot of issues coping with my parents splitting, as most kids do. And I found myself in a place of getting into wrong relationships with males, and then eventually into my adult life with men. And I found myself in a lot of traumatic situations and a lot of abusive situations. And what ended up happening was I ended up being a mother at a very young age. My oldest son, I actually walked across the stage with him. I was pregnant. And I never thought that I would be in a position to where I was a single parent. I was a statistic at that point, right? A teen mom. I never thought that I would be that. I was a straight A student. I had a full scholarship to go to college. And there was a lot of pressure on me in my senior year of high school to essentially not either carry on with the pregnancy or to give the child up for adoption. And it was in that time that I realized that a lot of my self-value was destroyed at that point, because I was looked at as, you don't have anything to offer. You don't have anything to give. You have no education. You have no job. You have no money. How are you going to take care of a child? And it was really my faith in God at that point that kind of strengthened me to push through and say, no, I'm going to make it. I'm going to do it. I am going, I am strong in him, and this is not going to define me, in a bad situation. And so I decided to forego my scholarship. I decided to raise my child. And even through the experiences that I had, I didn't realize how broken I was. And a lot of times, when you're a parent, whether you're a mother or father, there are things from your childhood that, that are, if they're not resolved, or you don't take the time to heal through them. They just continue a cycle.
Yeah.
And so for me, it wasn't until after my fourth child that I realized that, wow, there's a cycle here. What's going on? What's happening? What is it that's in me that's attracting the wrong kind of relationships in my life?
Hmm.
And so as a young mother and being a single parent, it's been a desire of mine and a passion for me to work with single parents, to help parents, because I know the challenges that come with that. I know the challenges that come when you're raising, children. There are challenges in the child itself, so to speak, right? Because every child is not the same. So you're dealing with a lot of mental things as well with your children, and the dynamics of blended family, and whether there's an absent parent there or not, whether there's an involvement. And so that is a whole nother story for me, but I know a lot of parents can relate to when you separate and you're no longer with the person, with that child's parent, that things can get a little complicated and can cause, trauma. So for me, this is very near and dear to my heart, to help parents, to help children. And I want to do it in a way that is going to help them, not only just to help navigate through those challenges and stresses,
Right.
but for healing as well. The mother and the child, right? The father and the children. So that is my story pretty much in a nutshell. There are things that as a parent, you wish that you could say, okay, everything is perfect and everything, and I have arrived. But I have found just in my own story with my children that you raise them, you give them everything, and you do everything for your children.
Mm.
And then you take those experiences to help someone else.
Yeah.
So that's part of my story there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for both of you sharing and being so transparent, because I think it's so important. One, as a parent, when you become a parent, your world changes. And I know for me, it's like, oh, I want to give my kids the best life. I want them to have a better life than I had. But then reality sets in and you're like, okay, like my child's never gonna have a meltdown in a store. Oh yeah, that's definitely gonna happen to you, right? Like my child's never gonna do that, right? And then you find yourself in a store after you've been an experienced parent, going up to the young parent, being like, "It's okay, I got you. Like this is normal." But you hit on some really key things that I think are really important. And one, you talked about healing, which is really important. You talked about tough situations, that the whole comment, what happens at home stays at home. I've heard that a lot, right? And it puts a stigma on that we can never talk about the struggles.
Absolutely.
And I have many, many friends who grew up in a toxic family environment, and that's exactly what happened, is they thought they couldn't talk about it. And I think about our youth today, and more than ever, and maybe it's because of social media, they are hurting. We hear that the suicide statistics are skyrocketing. Students are depressed, they're anxious, they're cutting themselves. I mean, I never in my wildest mind would ever think that someone would be in so much pain that they would cut themselves. And this is something that's happening throughout our youth. And so I think that this is so important, what you guys are doing. And this really segues into what you have been focusing on, is helping people learn how to have hard conversations. And we talk about this a lot in business, right? That a lot of times leaders don't want to deal with conflict. When I was a young leader, I would literally get a stomach ache if I had to deal with conflict. I mean, literally be sick to my stomach and be like, I do not want to have this conversation with this person.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
no one trains you on how to deal with conflict. Really, all I ever saw was how my parents dealt with conflict, or maybe my teachers, but that was it. And so I remember just dreading it, and it would be so stressful. And obviously, as the more experience I got, the better I got at it, and the less stressful it was. But how do you guys help people have hard conversations?
So the first thing is really, for me, it's the deep dive and willing to be authentic and honest. Many of us, when I talk about identity, many of us are not ready to be honest. right? And honesty is the beginning of really getting yourself to health. I'm a personal trainer. And so when I train clients, I tell them, I'm not looking for your strengths when I'm training you. I'm actually looking for the areas where you're the weakest. And that's how we improve. That's how you get better. So many times in life, we've developed a culture of toxic positivity where we talk a lot about all the great things. Well, here's the problem. If we really take a step back, here's a hard conversation that we have to have as a society. We've identified and given the teenage years an identity already. So most people don't have a positive outlook identity about teens. Because if you hear our words that we use about those teenage years, you hear statements like, oh my gosh, my kid's a teen. Oh my gosh, they don't listen. Oh my gosh, what in the world is wrong with these teens today? Right? Oh my
Yeah.
God, if these teenagers don't get it together, oh my gosh, I can't depend on these teens when what is the future going to look like with these teens?
Yep.
And when you hear that coming out of the mouths of so many adults, and then when teens hear this, because they hear it, they may
Mm.
not say anything, but they hear it. My children, my teens taught me, they said, Dad, you expect us to live a life of faith, but you don't even entrust us enough to believe in us enough to let us go out and do that.
Mm.
So how do you tell us to have faith, but you don't have faith in what you're telling us to have faith about?
Mm.
And my daughter used that about dating. She
Mm.
said, you're always so concerned and you're always so nervous about what's going to happen to me. But Dad, shouldn't you have faith that you teach me to have? Shouldn't you, instead of you being afraid and fearful and always saying, I can't do, you can't do? She said, Dad, you're strict. And this is what changed my life. My daughter said this when she was like 11. She said, and when I'm older, Dad, I'm not going to come up here and stay with you.
Hmm.
And that made me as a father have to have a hard conversation with myself. So here's the thing. In order to have a hard conversation, you won't have them with other people if you won't have them with yourself.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
run away from having them with people, Doc, because we're not comfortable with having them with ourselves, looking in the mirror.
Very, very true. Oh my gosh. I love that. And I just want to pause for a second because that is really impactful. Really, really impactful is that, when you guys were talking about hard conversations is with other people, but so impactful to me that you're saying you need to have a hard conversation with yourself.
Absolutely.
And that in itself right there. So how do you get yourself to have that hard conversation? Because I think this is a powerful moment here that you guys are talking about. How do we get ourselves to that moment?
So here's what I had to do for myself, babe, and you chime in whenever you feel like it, babe. But I had to, Dr. Ducharme, I had to sit myself down first of all. And after all the things that the patterns, Tabitha mentioned the cycles
Mhm.
in life. After all the cycles and the patterns, after 3 marriages that failed for me, 3 marriages, and I'm out here touching the world, right? Serving in the community, getting awards by city officials and traveling and speaking in schools. I remember the day that I sat by myself. I was in my house and I sat on my porch. I collapsed going out to work in the morning and I dropped and just started to bawl my eyes out. And the reason I bawled my eyes out was because I was out saving the world, but I was internally dying and nobody even knew it. And so, in order for me to have that hard conversation, I had to allow myself to have that real, authentic moment
Mm.
alone, without the audience. My children weren't there. My wife wasn't there for me to blame her, but my parents weren't there for me to blame them. My past was not there. There was me in this present moment, recognizing that I had built this life of isolation where I was literally outside of that space that I was in. I was running from everything else. And in that moment, I had to inhale that moment and say to myself, it doesn't get better until you face you. And in order to face you, you have to sit with you. You have to be willing to sit with you. That's not, turn the noise out. Like put the cell phone away, cut the TV off. And many of us struggle with sitting with ourselves in quiet. And so that's the first place I think it starts, is being authentic with yourself, to have the courage to pause and sit with you. And then write down, I had to make a list of the cycles that existed in my life that I didn't want, the things that were happening around me that were keeping me stuck. As I began to make that list is now not poison. That list is the healing list. We got to change how we see the things that we're writing about our story, the things that we're struggling in. That statement, God never fails, that's what it's about. When your identity is not wrapped up in the way that the world has described that list that we call failures. Failure has a lure and is related to success. Nobody has succeeded without failing. So there's a connection there.
Absolutely. So powerful. And I love that. I mean, really, it's being willing to be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Because how often will we do whatever we can not to be uncomfortable in that moment? And everything you guys are saying really resonates with me. One of the books I wrote was called Authentically You, Empowering Your Way to Success. And basically I'm talking about my path and how I had to realize that I wasn't on the right path, and how I had to have those hard conversations with myself and really be willing to be uncomfortable, as you know, as you guys would say, that God never fails. And so true. Both of you have, great paths that you've taken. And of course, you've had to go through those struggles and to have those revelations. But something you said in one of your posts was, and I'm going to summarize, God never fails. When this shapes your identity, it causes you to live fearless. So Tabitha, tell me about what this means.
Well, for me, it's very interesting because for a very long time, I struggled with a lot of insecurities about myself and who I am. And it wasn't until I really got back into the word again. I had actually walked away from the church for 16 years, actually, from a relationship that I had. It just ended up where I stopped going to church. I stopped fellowshipping and was kind of like in my own personal spiritual growth, so to speak, outside of the body of Christ, right? So I wasn't reading the Bible as much. I wasn't in prayer as much. And for 16 years, I had walked away. And so I found myself in a position to where I was constantly battling insecurities of who I am. And when I started studying, when Tariko and I got together, it was one of the things that we started to do together as a couple. We started to get into the word. We started to read scriptures more, do Bible study. And so those insecurities that I had, I wasn't struggling with as much because of who God says I am, that I am strong, that he hasn't given me the spirit of fear, right? So God never fails. God is always there, and he always has been there, and he always has been faithful, even when I wasn't a full participant, so to speak, in the relationship with him, right? And for me, I just look at my life and I look at the many, many times that God has saved me, that God has spared me, that God has taken me where situations could have been a lot worse, but he protected me and he kept me. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm thankful for that. So personally, for me, that's what it means for me, that he will never let me down. he will never let me down, and that there's nothing more that he will give to me that I can't bear. So any situation, anything that I'm going through as a parent, as a mother, just in life, it is going to magnify more of the strength that's already inside of me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of the Footprints poem. I don't know if you guys have heard that one before, but
Yes.
yeah, the very last part of it is what I really, really love. I won't read the whole thing because I know it's long, but it says, "The Lord replied, my precious, precious child, I love you and I would never leave you during your times of trial and suffering. When you see only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you." So I really love what you're saying, and it's so true. And we've talked about you guys are doing amazing work, and I think one of the great things that you guys can do, that we can do as adults, is be transparent with our children and
Yeah.
honest. We try so hard to hide the things we've done that we think, I never would want my kid to know that I did that. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. But really, we have to be transparent with them, because if we want them to step past the pain that we've had and be able to heal, we've got to be honest with them. And that's really, I think it's really difficult, as a parent, to tell our kids of our failures, because we don't want our kids to look at us like that, you know? And so I appreciate that. And I think, and I know you guys are doing this in the school systems and with school districts and coaching and mentoring, but it's really getting people to, like you said, be authentic with themselves, be real. If you can know your identity in God, then you don't have to have an identity in anything else, because God's love is forever. It's going to stay there. So no matter how bad you are, no matter what you do, no matter how stupid you are. And I think that that's something that definitely needs to be preached more, because we have so many just bad things out there that kids are turning to, um, that's just out there. The internet was a good, bad thing, right? It brought information to us, but it also brought a tremendous amount of other things that aren't great. Now, I know you guys are doing a new podcast and you've got a lot of things going on. So I want to make sure that I can direct people to where you're at. So what are the best ways, one, that they can get connected to your podcast that you're doing, and also get connected to you if they want you guys to come and speak or chat with them? We want to put that up on the screen, or put those links also when we post it out.
Absolutely. So the first way to get in touch with us, if you email us at info@exposuretalks.com, that's the best way to reach Tabitha and I for speaking engagements. Definitely booking for 2023. Wow. I'm sitting there like, whoa, we're in a different year. So we're booking right now for 2023. And we're excited about, we're actually working right now on a mission to go out to different cities to have these exposure talks, normalizing hard conversations within schools. What we want to do is we want to bring students into an auditorium and have some hard conversations. But the benefit from having the hard conversations with the students is for the staff, for the administrators, to really gain insight into what it is that their students are really experiencing from day to day. It's one thing for us to put up the smoke and all the lights and stuff for the kids, but do we ever stop to really ask them if that is helping? Like, do we really take the time to hear what it is that they actually need from you as a leader in the school? Or do we just sit together as adults and we make a determination that the data says that kids need this, and we're going to do this work? This is what we're going to focus on as adults. And the kids are, we call it rebelling, but I don't call it rebelling. They're not rebelling. They're actually reaching. They're reaching for what they need. And so we want to have those conversations with in cities all across the United States, so that we can help districts to unpack and really see how they need to service the mental health of young people.
Yeah.
How do they need to service engaging with families within their districts, but also how welcoming is your school? Like, you say it's welcoming, and maybe it is at the front door, right in the front office, but really, how welcoming is your school? Like, if I brought somebody to the front door, or they just randomly called in, what would that experience be like? And I've been trained in that and doing what's called a welcoming schools walkthrough. So I'd love to go around and help districts kind of understand what that looks like for families and how we're engaging each other in relationships.
That's fantastic. Well, I love that. And you know what we need to do is have you guys back in like a year and you talk about all the amazing things you've done,
Oh
all the
yeah,
things
oh
you've
yeah,
seen. You can give us that data after you talk with all those students about what you're seeing, because I know this is an issue across the line. My husband has been an elementary teacher for nearly 19 years. I've worked in academia for 23. So we see them on all levels, from the young age to the college age.
absolutely.
And it's important. I think now more than ever, the work you guys are doing is absolutely important. Our youth need it. Our, leadership needs to know it. And, we need to do that. So I think this is great. So for those of you who might be writing, listening, working out, not right in front of the screen, we will put all these links on there so you guys can get access to them. You can always message us as well, and we will connect you with Tariko and Tabitha. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate your stories, what you're doing, and excited to continue to support you guys. So thank you so much. And as I always say, live, love, laugh, and always be your authentic self.